what size I wanted. Oh, it's gonna be interesting here. A little bit of a time. So you can see I've set this up. I'm not going to open up this new one, but it's 72 inches by 72 inches by 6 inches deep. So we're going to do a tiny little puppy dog, but I build them about 5 or 6 times bigger than I want them to be because it affords me more detail when I'm working with detail. So we're going to build this dog 6 feet tall. And then in the end, and it'll be 6 inches deep from front to back. And then in the end, we'll end up with a product that's going to be a 12 by 12 inch file, about an inch, less than an inch deep for actual carving. And you guys, if you've played with Aspire or V-Carve, you know you can change the depth of the models and stuff. So I'm going to cancel out of that because I've already started. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to clip on Shepherd. Let's see if that opens up. Yeah, so let me shut off a few layers here for a minute because I've already cheated and started. So what I would normally do is I would go grab, I would come up here to import bitmaps, and I've got a half a dozen pictures of dogs that I want to make files of. Are in this file. So I have a Weimar here and a little pup that's really cute and a Yorkie and another pup and then this German Shepherd here. I would pick one of these and drop it in. I would just click on it and it would show up in the file. Well, I've already done that. So I'll show you. I use layers I've hidden some of the stuff already. So here's the dog picture I want to use. And I've loaded, you can see it sitting in that 6 foot by 6 foot square. I've also copied another one and placed it over here beside it, and it'll become more apparent why I have that other one there when we get to the modeling part of this. So the way that Aspire does modeling, there's really 2 sets of tools. One is blocking up shapes, and the other one is the modeling tools. If you get into one, and we'll get to modeling where we can actually sculpt a little bit like it's clay, and we'll be playing with that a little bit. Most of what I'm going to do today, I'm going to do with my mouse, but I have a mouse with a roller ball on it, which allows me to do things like, you know, make the images bigger and go back and forth pretty quick. I can see when I'm on Zoom, it's going to slow this down a bit as we do it. But so I use a mouse pad. I also have sitting beside me a Wacom tablet, which Wacom tablet is a pen that I can draw on the tablet. And I use that when I'm trying to do fine things like little areas around the eye or something. I want to do better detail than what I can get with a mouse, but 90% of my models are done with a mouse. Okay, so the way I start this, and I've already done all the vector work on this dog, ready to start building up the model. So I'm going to show you how I let's see, we'll get the dog sitting here. So the first thing I do is I'll click on the dog, the picture. I right click on it and see this where it says object properties right here. What this allows you to do is fade the bitmap in and out. So depending on how dark the picture you have is, you want to fade this out so that you're going to draw lines all over this thing with your mouse. So you want to set these things light enough that you can see the lines, but these edges where there's some detail hidden on these pretty little edges around the sides. And this particular picture is a very dark dog with some real light highlights on him. So I kind of set it somewhere down here. Now you can start to see what's going on the edges of the dog. So I set that up first in preparation for tracing the dog. Now I don't use bitmap tracer because it doesn't work. So I'm going to trace this whole dog out and the pieces of him that I want to make models of. So the way that works is I go into drawing, I click here on lines, draw a line, and then the only buttons I'll really be using is this one up here that says toggle geometry snapping off. I toggle that off because if that's on, it tries to go to geometric shapes. It tries to jump to other lines while you're clicking, or it tries to go to straight spots. But I do click it back on when I'm trying to connect the end of the drawing. So in this particular case, I'm going to just draw, let's undo that. Quit that. Let me see. That's what I wanted to do. So I'm going to zoom in here pretty close, and I'm going to just show you how I would vector draw one of the ears for a minute. So we'll take this one, and I would start here. And this is a whole bunch of button mouse clicking. And you want to do this, you want to make sure you don't cross lines or create any problems with your vectors. This is why I use a rollerball mouse, so I can move around it pretty easily like this. I'm going to delete this one as soon as I'm done with it, but I want to. So we're going to create a model of this ear at some point. Excuse me. And it's going to have some depth to it. So I'm going to come down here far enough into the head that I don't worry about I'm losing part of the model, and it'll make more sense. Now I'll come back up here and click on toggle geometry, because I want these two ends to connect. So I've now made one element of that dog, and it's ready to start modeling that one ear. Now I did the whole dog a little bit earlier today. So I'm gonna delete this one off of here, and I'll show you what I did earlier today. And I just in the sense of trying to speed it up a little bit. So under bitmaps, so can you guys see all the different vectors on there? And if I turn off the bitmap layer, you can see these are all the layers I met. So all these to me represent different levels of the dog. If you picture that we're going to build this dog from the back out, he's going to be 6 inches deep from the back out. The furthest thing back is his tail down here. So I want to be able to build that way in the back. The next thing I'm going to build is his body, which is behind all this other stuff that's going on. And then I'm going to build his ears, which is the next thing coming forward. Then I'm going to hit, the body kind of comes up into here. If you look at where it goes, I use it to kind of frame in the head. And then everything in front of the body, like these front paws and the mane and the nose and the eye, all those things are in front of the body and will stack on top of it. That makes sense? And if you haven't used layers before, layers is kind of a fun way to do this, because what happens is you start out, you only have 2 layers on here, the bitmap layer and a new layer, and everything you put on there is in those layers. And then the way layers work, it's a little bit like a timeline. If you start a new layer, everything from there forward in your work will appear in that layer. So I started a small bitmap down here, and you can see that thing I erased, and I didn't erase it, that mistake I made. But anyway, the next one will show up. So we won't play with layers too much more. So does anybody have any questions about creating those vectors, how that works? Just kind of clicking around shapes?
Hi, Scott. It's Alan. I just got in finally. Sorry for the.
Okay.
Could you give me a quick update to how you got there?
Yeah, this was, so at this point here, we've just opened up, I'm building a 72-inch square model of a dog. It's 6 inches deep. So the whole model is going to be about 6 inches deep. Okay. This is all just vectors that I built.
So you just took your original image?
I took the original image and I clicked around it with the drawing tool and made a bunch of different little vectors. And what I did is I built them based on the different levels of the dog. Like here's the vector for the tail here in the back.
Yeah.
And that's the furthest thing away.
Right.
So I want to be able to build a separate model for that. We're going to combine them all together eventually. So I have a separate model for it because it exists at a different depth than, say, like the body does.
Yes.
And the ears are at like a second depth.
Okay.
And then his face will be at a different depth, and this great big beautiful mane will be at a different depth. So depending on the model, you build a bunch of. It took me about 30 minutes to click around these. So,
okay.
Is there any other questions on that?
So you did that individually. You didn't let the trace it or whatever what's that?
Yeah.
The little bird.
There's a bitmap, trace bitmaps over here.
Yeah.
And the problem with trace bitmaps is it's just messy. And I've played with it off and on for 10 years. And it's really good if you're doing some kind of a form or where it's really nice, clean letters or something. But if it's not nice and clean, like this is so many different colors, you would get a mess. So it has its purpose and I sure use it. But when I'm doing animals like this and I want them to exist at different levels, you'll see why here in a few minutes. I need the models at different levels so that you can get, so I've carved for a long time. This is called shallow relief carving. And the idea is this dog, which realistically is probably 3 feet from front to back. We're going to make a carving that creates an illusion of him being that deep, but we're only going to have him in a 6-inch depth. So you're creating the illusion of depth. So to do that, we need things to appear behind each other. So
gotcha.
Make sense?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So this button over here is arrange views. I'm going to drop in the second side of this so I can see what I'm doing in modeling. And while I do that, I'm going to get to like this. And as I told you, the first thing I'm going to do is build a tail for the dog because I build everything from the front forward and I stack this. And remember, this model, the model is 6 inches deep and 72 inches tall. We'll resize that later. But I know that the furthest thing out on this dog is going to be his nose. So I got to end up somewhere around 5 to 6 inches deep on this nose. These paws might be 5 to 6 inches out. Probably his chest will be in the 3 to 4 inches out, and his ears will probably be 2 to 3 inches out from the back, if that makes sense. So laying this all out, I have some idea of physically how it's going to get laid out. So what you're going to watch here is a whole bunch of pieces get built together, and we're going to end up with a pretty roughed out looking dog. And then we'll get into the actual physical modeling of it, which is, I think, the more artsy part of what has to happen. So to build this tail, you click on modeling, and this is what you can do in Aspire that you can't do in VCarve. VCarve, you can manipulate a lot of 3D models and carve them and do that, but you can't build them. And that's, if you look at the difference between VCarve and Aspire, that's the beauty of it. So we're going to come up here, and there's a lot of different ways to create shapes. For this particular model, we're going to create a shape from a vector outline on all of these. If I was like, I built a Christmas train last year that had cylinders and square parts on it, and then I would use some of these, like these rotational pieces are really fun to make mechanical structures. But for pet dogs and stuff like that, I use this one. So we're going to say create a tail, please. And it pops up, and I got questions into Aspire why they do this, but you can see right now that it's set to create, it's going to rise from the edges at 27 degrees. The base is going to be at 12/100ths of an inch, and the whole height of the tail is going to be 3/10 of an inch. As soon as I change any one of those, it's going to go ahead and create the tail. It's going to create a tail for us, which just does slow things down a little bit. So I'm happy with, I probably will have this increase a little bit more. I'm going to go to like 36. I'm going to use, I like to have a bit of a reasonably thick base behind it. Because remember, we're going to cut this down by it's going to be 6 times thinner when I do this. So I do want some common space behind this. So we're going to start with everything's going to be about 1/2 inch of at least base behind it. And then the height of the tail, I can kind of look at this and see that the tail doesn't have much shape to it. So I'm going to ask the tail to get a little bit more shaped for me. And then you can see it puff up. And we're good. So then I'm going to just type in tail, and I'm going to say start a new component. So the next thing I'm going to start is this dog's body, which will cover everything up around the neck, even some of this little fuzz that goes out. And you'll understand when we get to modeling why I caught all that detail there. But so it's going to create a shape up there. And so same sort of thing here. We have the same base, so it's going to start from about just beyond the tail. I'm going to move it up a bit so it covers the tail. And I'm going to ask that to be, see how it started making the model already before I could adjust the shape of the body. So when I set the model up, it gives you chances to set 4 different degrees of detail. This is on the second highest level of detail. I'll go back and show you that here in a little bit. But if you use super high detail, it gets incredibly slow. I'm not saying I have the fastest laptop in the world, but, and it's creating a very big model right now. All right, so you can see there's a body showing up. And a couple things are noteworthy. You can see if you look right here, that tail is stacked on top of that body. So that has to come down there with how you combine components. So if you look at this one, this button right here, it says add to previous component. So it's just additive to everything. This one is subtractive to everything. And this is the one we use commonly here. It's merge the highest points with the previous component. So we're going to use that. And you'll see the tail start to drop in behind the body. But you can see the tail is still probably the 1/2 inch base, plus it's another 7/8 high or 1 inch and something high. It's still higher than the body is, but the body's only, I've only made it 2 inches. So I'm gonna make the body total somewhere around 2.5 inches. It'll give us more roundness to that body shape. And you can always go back and say, well, I'm going to drop the tail back some more, and you can play with that kind of stuff. But I also know the tail is going to get covered by some other things here in a few minutes. So this is much faster when I'm not doing it on a Zoom meeting. So. Okay, so that's the general body shape. We're going to just write body. I'm going to say start a new component. So let's put a couple. I'm going to try to do both ears at the same time because I want to get through building this reasonably quickly. I'm going to set that back in behind the body just a little bit by adjusting this. I also want the ears to be concave. And you're going to see they're already being developed, and they're not going to be concave. They're going to be, yeah, big out-shaped cones. So we're going to make them concave by making that a minus angle, which is going to tell us to go in. This is way too much, so it's going to go right back through the back end of the board here when it adjusts that. Yeah, and you can see that white area there is telling you that it's now created something that's deeper than the board. It's gone below the back of the board. So we're just going to make those. Okay. So I'm just putting these in place. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm getting them in place. We can come back and play with the depth of the body and the ears. And let's do one other thing with one of these ears just to make this a little bit cuter. Let's take, I'm going to show you what the tilt function is here. We're going to click on tilt. stopped that, I hit reset. So it's going to come back with no ears here in a second because I just figured out why I didn't want to do both ears at the same time. So we're going to do just one ear, and we're going to hit, it's all set up the way I want it right now. We'll hit, we'll go left ear, and I'll hit apply. Okay, and then we'll hit start a new component down here. Then I'm going to hit right ear. I'm going to hit apply. Okay, so there's both ears set up exactly the same way, but I want this dog like he's hearing something off to the side. So I'm going to hit set tilt. And you have a tilt and a fade button in the main screen in this, but it just gives you a tilt while you're doing this. And I'm going to tell it, I'm going to click it right here, and I'm going to, that's the pivot point of where it tilts at, and I'm going to click right here, and that's where it's going to tilt. And right now it's set to tilt 10 degrees. So watch what happens when it sets over here. You'll see that ear all of a sudden swing out. And you can see it tilted too much. So we do a couple things to that. I can drop the base back to move that ear back in behind a bit better. This is all stuff you just have to kind of play with to get a sense of how you want to do that. And then I'm going to grab this and I'm going to say, well, I just want it to tilt a little bit, maybe 5 degrees. Okay, so now we have both ears, and one of the ears is tilted a little bit, and we're good to go there. So let's that's all good. So what's our next big area here we're going to work on? Let's build the mane of this dog next. So again, I'm working from front to back, so we'll call this the mane, kind of like a lion's mane. He's got a big, beautiful mane around that. We don't want it to be a reset. We want it to be to come out. And this is going to be okay. So now nothing happened over here, right? Does anybody know why nothing happened? So this is occurring underneath. It's not deep enough to pop out. So if I say if I add 3 inches of base to that, it's going to come right out through that, the rest of the model. Possibly.
Scott, how do you?
You'll see what happened when I changed the bit. Oh, say that again.
How do you, sorry, maybe you've already covered this. How do you determine where you set your base height to begin with? Do you start, because it's 6 inches, do you start in the middle at 3?
No, so the very first thing, like the tail, I just put a little 1/2 inch of base height there, just so I have something behind the actual modeling part of it.
And that's in the positive side though, or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because your depth is 6 inches, does it automatically set like at -3 and +3?
Yes, it does. It gives you space to go either way from that. Now, if I wanted to come 5 inches out here, I can. You hit apply, and you're going to watch this thing lurch out. Okay, so you can play with that. These things here are like yellow traffic signs. They're suggestions, sort of thing. So But now what I want to do with the beard on this guy, so you can see I don't have much height to this. Let's give it a bit of height so you can understand a bit more about this. I just gave it 2.7 inches of, so you can see there, I've now created some actual shape to that, right? But it's sticking out too much. So I'm gonna come back down here. And I'll show you there's two ways to play this as we work on that part of the, so you can see that I've lost part of it now because it's not out far enough, right? And it's in there. So there's a couple ways to play this. So I want this hairy mane thing to show up. One of the things we can do is just go like this and say, well, make it additive instead of, so it'll put it fully on top. See what just happened? It put it on top of that shape. And then I can actually bring this down to 0 on the base height. And you'll see this gap right here go to 0. But what I want is that mane to show. I want to build up some size here, which we did probably too much with the two. So this is where you play with this while you're trying to build this thing up. So I would take that down a little bit less. Okay, so that's a little bit. I want this to be more, this to be lifted up more from, see, I'm gonna put this whole chest piece underneath it still anyway, when I get to that. Whoops, I just shouldn't have clicked on that, sorry. Yeah, as soon as I clicked on a new one, it erased that. Well, we'll put this chest piece in here right now anyway, so let's apply that. And just, you're getting the moron's version of how to do this today, so. Let's see what else we have here. I forget, I did this morning. What else have I got? Let's pull this one up. There's a couple pieces here that have to occur in oil. It looks like I had another chest piece here. I did have another chest piece. So let's build these in really quick. So I'm going to build this chest piece in first. And then I'll build this kind of collar piece. So that just gives us some depth in that lower chest area. So you can, this is why I put this other picture here, so I can reference it. So we just build up this area here a little bit, which we know should stick out quite a bit from this, right? So we just did that here. I would give myself a little bit more base and more separation on that. All right. So that's going to be, we're going to rename that chest. I'm going to hit start a new component. So now we're going to add in a little bit on this ruffle right here, and then we'll do this lower face. I'm going to go back over here on my, so this will be this ruffle we're going to add in. Give that a little bit of separation as well and hit apply. Make that a little bit less. It's okay to stack these on top of each other like this because the rest of the face is going to cover up these lines here, but I want these lines down here showing up so I can sculpt on those, and it's going to help make that beautiful mane and stuff that we see on the, we'll call that the chest. And we'll start a new piece. So you can see over here what we're building. We have the tail, which is spelled wrong, body, the left ear, right ear, chest, mane. Now I'm going to try to get this, what I call the lower face here to, here's what we want. Back up here. I'm going to go through this reasonably quickly because I can see I'm going to. So that one I want to be. So I want this one to be, to add on, to build on top of these here. And I want those cheeks to show up on both sides of that face like that. So I'm going to use the same tilt function again. I'm going to click tilt. And I'm going to, once it's ready, I'm going to, it says it's ready, I'm going to hit set. It's set, and I'm going to set the hinge point right here. And I'm going to tilt it up down here. And it's going to lift this lower face up over this chest area here. We should see it come out. Maybe not enough. Yep, not quite enough. I'm not getting all that detail to show up down there that I want. So I'll bring it out some more. Still didn't quite get it where I want it. So I'm going to cheat and use some of the. All right, so now I can see the definition I want down here at the bottom, which is what I'm after. And from the side, you can start to see how I'm building depth out to the front. And I'm gonna do in the next 5 minutes, I'm just kind of gonna blow in here and get the head in place so I can show you how we do actual sculpting on this. So, oh, I didn't hit the, that's gonna make that disappear on me. Yeah. So what happens then is I hit apply. Let's hit apply. I didn't hit start new component. So as soon as I clicked on a new vector, it just dropped everything that I did and I lost it. But you go right back and the measurements that I were using are all still the same. So it'll recreate that just the way it was. And now I'm going to write lower face, start a new component this time. And now we'll do the head. We'll get some head in here. That's, let's get a little more depth in that. And again, I'm going to use the tilt to bring it out. So hit set, put the hinge right there and tell it I want it to tilt to right there. And it should bring out the rest of that lower part of the face out over the main. You'll see it show up right here. Look at that. Okay. Okay, not perfect, but I'm gonna keep moving on. I'm gonna call that face.
Hey, Scott.
So you'll see what happened.
I had a quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
How do
Yeah.
you select your hinge point to make it tilt? Do you want it to tilt forward or back? You know.
Yeah, so in this particular case, I wanted it to stay stationary right up here.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to come out down here. So the very first thing you do is select the hinge point, and then you tell it what you want to tip there. So if we wanted, for example, this ear right here,
Mm-hmm.
I click on the ear again. And I say I want to tilt the ear. Let's lean the top of the ear forward. I'm going to hit set. And I'm going to click right here. And I'm going to go up to the top, somewhere towards the top of the ear. Ooh, come on, baby. Oops, sorry, I got to do set. Come on. Let's come out of that for a minute. For whatever Aspire's just locked up there. So I'm going to.
I kind of get what you're doing now. I just thought it was kind of like a rolling point, how you're picking the hinge. If you want to bring the face out, you go horizontally. I understand what you're doing now.
Yeah, you could kick on the left side or the right side. When we get into the nose, you'll see we'll do some different stuff there. So let's build up the rest of the faces quick here so I can spend the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes doing a little sculpting and show you how that kind of works, and we'll go from there. So you guys can always send me more questions afterwards, I suppose. Or we'll finish this next Sunday. So that's up too much. And it's also on top of that. Okay, we'll just call that nose. That is not a, I would probably play with that a little bit more, but I'm going to just kind of plow on through here for a minute because I think and I'm going to put this, I'm going to have this merge with highest point because I don't want that being over top of that other piece I just made. There's another way to do it. And you can see it disappears back into the sculpture because it's not out far enough the wool. All right, so that one's gonna have to be. There's a certain amount of this that's just sort of trial and error. Yeah, so that is too much of that. Okay, we're going to leave that like that for just now. I'll come back and fix this later. We'll do two or three more little components quick. So I'm going to make a bit of a shallow spot here for a recessed area by the eye. And it's got to be combining. That's a little too much. Quite a bit too much. And you can see it has the bases up too high. That's above where I want that to be. So I'm going to drop that down to 0 or just slightly below. All right, let's see if we can get a nose to show up here quick, and then we can do some sculpting. I'm going to just leave the one eye undone for right now, and the rest of the pieces undone, so we can spend the last 8 or 9 minutes on sculpting. We'll take that a little bit less there. We're going to do a tilt on the nose as well because I want that flatter to what we're looking at. So the nose, I'm going to try to get to stand up some more so it's flat looking straight at us when I do it. So I'm going to click on set and up top, and you'll see it. So the eyeballs, I haven't created the eyeballs yet, and I'll tell you what, the very last thing I do is after I do all the sculpting is that's when I do the eyeballs, because I want to have that beautiful, nice round shape showing up in there after I, let's see if I can. Okay, we have another negative space. We're going to put a mouth in here quick, and then we can start sculpting. Okay, so now you currently have what I call the ugly dog. And so here's one of the great new upgrades that came with Aspire 10.2, I think, a year or two ago. I'm going to add another level in here, and I'm going to hit insert new level. Now I have another level. It used to be I had to take all these components and I'd have to save this like this, and I would call it the component file so I could play with them individually. Now they have this thing that says combine, create a visible model from from everything visible. So I just click on that, and you're gonna watch this dog get twice as thick right now. Okay, and it's because you're seeing 2 times the model. So I'm gonna turn off all of level 1. And it takes it back to that. Before I do that, just a sort of, I'm going to turn this off one more time. So we've now created a model that we can sculpt. I'm going to go back up here, turn these all back on for a second. I'm going to show you just a housekeeping thing that makes this easier when you're designing. So they're all back on. I'm going to delete that because I should have done this a second earlier. All right, so I'm going to go into my layers and I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to call this, first off, I'm going to go back and name this one. I'm going to rename it components. And then I'm going to label this one sculpting. Okay. Which I spelled that wrong as well. So now I'm going to come back in here, and so now we just created a new layer called sculpting. So, and I'm going to rebuild this. There's my visible model. I'm going to turn this all off. So we should be able to go to layers, and we should be able to turn off the vectors here and the components, and just work on, so all those lines are gone and the components turned off. So now we can see, if you use vectors like that, you don't have to use these 2 images that I use, but I'm about to sculpt this, so I want to show you what tools I use when I'm sculpting. So we will click on that. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? What we did, just we blocked together, we Lego built together a whole bunch of components for this dog. Does that make sense? Now, the bad news is now comes the artistic part. So I'm going to come up here and use this sculpting tool. That's not what we want to have happen. I got to turn that off for a minute because it's sitting right on top of a. Okay, let's see if we can sculpt now. I don't know why the image showed up, why the bitmap showed up through the sculpting tool, because that's not been. So this bitmap image should not be showing up here right now, and I wonder if it's just something that I did with the layers. There, I turned off the bitmap. I have no idea why that's shown up that way. Oh, show overlay image. This button down here got clicked. There we go. Sorry. So there is this show overlay image down here and I clicked on that inadvertently. So now we're back to, I'm in the sculpting tool, and I'm going to show you a couple things we do here. First off, it almost always turns on with smoothing. So I'm going to smooth some of these lines that I want to be more blended, and you can control a couple key things to preserve the transparency. So what that does is it means I can carve outside of this and it won't drag stuff out into outside of the dog. So I can do smoothing down here and it won't pull. I won't pull it off of. So you want to make sure that's on. If you ever, when we get into doing fine detail fur and stuff, like if I come down here and I want to create some fur that's off the model, I go, man, I really wish I had some more down here. Then you can turn off, preserve the transparency, and you can grab, you say deposit, and you can put something else out here. But if you have preserved the transparency, you can't do that. So the undo brush is a miracle. So if you don't like something you did, learn how to use the undo brush. So all that smoothing I just did, I rub over it with the undo brush and it fixes it all. So the undo brush is available to you until you hit keep it or okay. So up until that point, you're okay to just do, you can undo anything that you don't like. So I'm going to smooth some of this guy out and show you we're really kind of at the end of our time. So I'm going to go on for about another 7 or 8 minutes here, I think. For those of you that have the time, you can stick. And I'll show you where this kind of goes. So let's just work on this side of the dog's face for a couple minutes. Smudging. Smudging is where I do a lot of the artwork part of this and this finer detail. So if I want to start making that fur more detailed, get my so is just essentially drag. It's like you're scraping putty. Remove, depending, you want to watch how much strength you lose on remove. but I could make some more areas deeper in there. And if you make a mistake with it, where you go up here where you don't want to do it, just use the undo brush on that part of it. So look, voice of from you guys, it took about an hour to do the block up for this dog. I'm happy to schedule next Sunday another hour to get into the details of how to create all the detail carving in this. Does that work, or do you want to go on for another 10 minutes and just see how I do some of it and imagine the rest of it, or what are your guys' thoughts on, because I did say it would be about an hour, and I respect
I'd be
your
interested
time.
in doing another class next week.
You want to do it?
I would enjoy some more tutorials.
Well, I think what I do, because I hate some of the stuff I didn't leave it to do it. I think go back and correct the dog and leave it all blocked in. And then if you want to, I'll put a note out, and next Sunday we'll do this again, and we'll get into the actual sculpting, into these sculpting tools, and how to get more of this detail. Because this part of it here, I think you guys can kind of grasp. Blocking it in is you just kind of have to do that with the tool. So if you guys are good for that, I'll save this thing as it is, and we'll come back in a week. I will have finished blocking him in, and we'll spend some quality time on how to do I'm going to give him arms too. I think I'll do that. I didn't get that done down here. So if that's good with you, that's I will hit stop, and you can go have your evenings, and we'll do this this is a good time for most of you.
Works for me.
It's late in the evenings on Sunday. We'll try it again. So watch for something in wherever you saw this link before. I posted in 2 places, in Vectric and in CNC tips and tricks. And we'll try it again in a week.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks very
Thanks
much,
a lot.
Scott.
All right.
Have a good night, Scott.
Appreciate it. Talk to you in a week. You got any questions, send me notes.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay. All right, Joan, you ready to wrap it up? Hit the off button. Did
I'm hitting
we
the off
record
button.
that?
I did.